is that, huh? Alright, welcome back. In this episode, I'm going to show you guys how to inspect and fix your airbox. These airboxes can go bad. They're made out of two pieces and they tend to split. I originally was going to do all of this in one episode, but it rapidly snowballed. So this episode is just repairing the airbox, and the next episode will be installing everything else, including this absolute nightmare of hoses and whatnot. So anyway, let's dive into the airbox. All right, it is rapidly becoming winter. I'm going to be doing this outside because I don't want to wind up making more Porsche music. So from what I understand, which may change as I learn more about this, fuel comes in here and it goes to the center of this fuel distribution valve. And from there, unlike a electronic fuel injection system where each injector is kind of squirting fuel at a predetermined interval, these fuel injectors just sort of dribble a mist of fuel at all times. And that vapor, that fuel vapor builds up in the intake runner, or in the head actually. And when the intake valve opens, it gets sucked into the cylinder. So that's how this system works. It's not as precise, which is kind of why this isn't as efficient or as powerful as some of the later systems. But it's pretty reliable. It's a lot less finicky than carbs, and it does return pretty decent fuel economy. Before we get into it though, what I've been reading a lot about was how you need to inspect your airbox. Now, Pelican sells this. It's a pop-off valve. It goes right about here, and the idea is that if your engine backfires, instead of blowing apart your expensive plastic airbox, this lid pops open and it's fine. I've seen some evidence on the internet that suggests even if you have one of these, you can still blow your airbox. The other thing is that although I haven't had any problems driving this car, after learning what to look for to see if your airbox is blown, I think this airbox may be blown already. All right, so here's the inside of my airbox. You can see there are these little machine screws right here. And if any of your screws have come out, your airbox is probably blown. This one looks like it's unthreaded quite a bit. This one, you can see it's lifting up. So that probably means this airbox is blown. I'm gonna show you where to check for that in a second. I do wanna say that this material, I believe, is polypropylene or ABS, some sort of plastic which is really hard to bond to. So I might try to repair this, but it is difficult to bond to. You can buy replacement airboxes and they will be like a glass-filled nylon, and then these fasteners right here, instead of being machine screws with a little fine thread, there'll be big beefier screws, the really coarse thread, to really get some compression right here. All right, so this is the bottom of my airbox, and I guess this is where you really want to look for cracks. Already I can see some cracks right here and right here. That doesn't necessarily mean this box is done, but I'm gonna flex it and see if I see any light. There's definitely a crack all the way from here to down here. You can see it with this light a little better. Now the factory used some sort of solvent adhesive that literally melted these pieces of plastic together. And unfortunately, that type of solvent is really hard to find. So I'm gonna try to come up with a different way to fix this crack before I reinstall this thing. What I think I'm gonna do first is I'm going to install a pop-off valve to prevent this from happening again. Just because through the drilling process and the installation of that pop-off valve, I might put a lot of stress here. And what I'd like to do is repair this area and then reassemble everything. All right, so the installation is pretty straightforward. I need to drill a hole about there and then bond this in with some epoxy. One tip before you do this, just make sure your drill bit is extended so that it hits this surface before it hits these ribs. All right, now we're gonna have to clean this up and probably dremel some of these ribs to get this thing to sit nice. We're also going to need to vacuum down in there too. Some of this plastic is okay to get sucked in, it'll just get burned up, but want to try to minimize that. All right, so now that the pop-up valve is fitted, you can fit it in there. I'm gonna need some epoxy that bonds really well to this. I might be running to the store to try to find something that's like a plastic welding type epoxy. The other thing I'm gonna do when I'm at the store is I'm gonna get rid of these machine screws that don't thread into anything besides the threaded portion of the plastic. And I'm going to look for a nut and bolt combination where I can sandwich this part of the airbox with this bottom piece of the airbox and put some clamping force on them before I try to seal this. Because right now, it's just these threads are just pulling out. I think I can probably just pull this screw out if I pull it really hard. Yep. So you can see that although these were self-tappers, they're just really finely threaded and they'll just pull right out of here. JB Weld PlasticWeld. I looked at a lot of different adhesives, but this one says it does glue ABS, which is difficult to adhere to. All right, so there's the crack right in there. And there's one of the fasteners right here. There's another one right there. And if you look over here, this is a third one right in the center of the screen here. But in order to access that one, I'm gonna need to take the top end apart. So this is real nasty. I don't know if you can see down in here, but there is just a thick layer of oily, nasty schmutz in there. Honestly, if it wasn't still bonded on one side, I would just drop the whole bottom half of this thing and clean it out. But I think what I'm gonna do is just scrape it, then vacuum it, and then spray it with brake clean and hope for the best. 'Cause that's real nasty. So I've probably used a can of brake clean on this and it's still absolutely disgusting. It looks like this gasket might be bad on the front edge here, so I think I'm gonna have to disassemble this even further. So this is rapidly snowballing. But I did get access to that third fastener that I want to do. I think I'm just going to try to remove some of these components, clean out what's in here, because I think I'll be able to access this bottom portion once I remove the throttle body. And I think I'm gonna just take this out and put some RTV where this is coming together to make a new gasket, because I don't want to wait another week to get another gasket for this thing. I'm gonna start with the throttle body. So as you can see, it's still pretty disgusting in there. I'm gonna scrape that out and vacuum it, but it is a lot cleaner everywhere else. So it looks like this is the last part I need to clean out. So the throttle body's disconnected. I'm just gonna take the whole fuel system off now, so just the airbox is left. We're gonna go ahead and remove all 6 of these. They each have a spring and a washer. I'm not sure if that's to prevent over torquing or what. We are going to remove all of it. Didn't think I'd be going this far when I started this part of the project, but you know, it's as good a time as any. There is no washer on this side because there is a little bracket holding the fuel lines. That's disconnected. The only thing connecting it to the airbox is this little sensor. And as you can see, it's a good thing I did this because the gasket was completely blown out of right here. Might order a new gasket, might just glue it back together with RTV. I don't know yet. Wow, sure looks a lot simpler without all that stuff stuck to it. Now you can really see the bottom half of this airbox and the top half, and it's all been glued on this seam. And the seam is just really coming apart starting about right here. So I think if I get this fastener, and this fastener with a nut and bolt, and then I goober a bunch of plastic weld in between there, I should be good. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw this in the parts washer and just scrub it for a while because it's still just completely disgusting. Alright, so what I've done here is I've used some screwdrivers to pry open this crack a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to smash the epoxy into this crack and then use the nuts and bolts to compress it. The problem is I don't have one of those tips that mixes this, so I'm gonna have to try to do it with this, which is really annoying, but you know what, no one's gonna see this part except for you guys, so it can look pretty ugly. First I'm gonna blow this out with compressed air. I just sprayed it with brake clean, so I wanna get it nice and dry. Because I'm wearing gloves, I'm going to try to force this stuff into the crack with my thumb. Alright, now we are going to compress this with some fasteners. So these are metric, so they should thread in the same way, but I'm just going to put a nut on the back of them to help compress this. Okay, we got all those in. I'm gonna go from this side and try to attach some lock nuts. Now what I'm going to do is install the block-off valve. All right, we're gonna let that cure. We're gonna come back to this tomorrow and reassemble it. All right, so the airbox is finished curing. The pop-off valve is nice and secure. And then that crack has been repaired and sealed and clamped with nuts and washers. So we should be all good. So now it's time to reassemble all this stuff. All right, that's it for this episode. Next episode is going to be installing all this stuff and making sure everything's working properly. So once I get a few more hoses, I think I'm gonna be able to wrap that up and I'll post that soon. So stay tuned. Cheers.